The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
We preview the March 3rd primary election in advance of our live election night coverage here on Peninsula TV.
Our political expert, Melissa Michelson, is here. The game is politics. The game is on.
Hi, I'm Kevin Mullen.
And I'm Mark Simon, and welcome to The Game.
For the first time in decades, California is in the middle of the race for the Democratic presidential nomination. And the Peninsula is ground zero for one of the hottest state Senate races in the region.
We're going to talk about that and more with our resident political expert, Melissa Michelson from Menlo College. Thank you for being here. And on election night, as Kevin mentioned at the top of the show, all three of us will be here with insights, analysis, and all the results locally for the March 3 primary in California and Super Tuesday in general. So we'll be covering politics here, around the nation, around the world. Why not? We'll have special guests, special features, and we'll be the only place for information on local races and local people anywhere in the Bay Area. So stick with us on election night. Melissa, thank you for being here. As Kevin said, we're in the middle of the presidential race. Thank you for moving the primary up. Kevin carried the legislation.
Excellent choice.
It's kind of exciting, isn't it?
It is. It actually feels like California is part of the choosing this time instead of just coming around later in June and hopping on the bandwagon. Yeah. We could help decide who's going to be the nominee.
So who's going to be the nominee?
Well, if I knew that, I could make a lot of money on those online betting sites where you bet on the nomination. I have no idea.
Let me ask you the flip side. Do you think, we saw 6 candidates on the debate stage this week. There's a couple more who were still in who didn't make this. Who won't be in, you think, by March 3rd? Do you think Tom Steyer might drop out? Probably not. Do you think everybody who's in will be in and we'll still have 8, 9 candidates to choose from?
I think everybody who's still in it is going to stay through Super Tuesday. I don't see anybody dropping out. Everyone looks at March 3rd and thinks it's right there. It's so close. I just have to do well on March 3rd and I still have a shot. So I don't think we'll see any more candidates dropping out.
I got to ask you, when you formulated the idea of moving the primary, did you think it would be this level of chaos in terms of who's running, how unsettled the whole thing is and could be?
Well, when we decided to move the primary up to Super Tuesday, we had no idea really what the field of candidates was going to be. What was most convincing for me was that California is moving largely to vote by mail, and I was intrigued by the fact that millions of vote by mail ballots were going to be mailed out the day of the Iowa caucus. So although we weren't trying to jump ahead of Iowa or New Hampshire, that wasn't going to be possible. California was going to be in the mix until this race is decided. So it is compelling. We're in the heart of it. It's appropriate that California is part of Super Tuesday because that's really the quasi-national primary after the initial state sort of proving ground process. But it makes sense that California, as the most populous state, this diverse state, 5th largest economy in the world, would be on Super Tuesday with those other states across the country. That will really help us solidify, I think, the race. We're going to know the day after Super Tuesday, I think, really who the true front runner is.
Well, not the day after, because it's going to take California a while to process all those ballots mailed on the day, because I think a lot of folks, they have their vote by mail ballot, but they're waiting because they want to see what's going to happen in Nevada, what's going to happen in South Carolina. And so I think a lot of folks aren't going to mail those ballots in as early as you might think, even though they've had them now for weeks, because maybe their favorite candidate won't look as viable, or maybe something's happening that's going to change their preference.
Quick record on that. 1.4 million ballots have already been cast as of this taping, which is far more than Iowa or New Hampshire and Nevada, and will be well ahead of South Carolina as well.
How many total ballots are estimated will be bound?
What's that?
How many total ballots are estimated? So what does the 1.4 represent in terms of the total number?
That's actually a relative sliver of the overall
It's a small
number of ballots, but just in terms of raw numbers, more votes have been cast in California than anywhere else.
So as of the taping of this show, Bernie's got some momentum. He's ahead. Biden seems to be hanging on with his fingertips. Is Super Tuesday in our California, is that going to change, or do you think Bernie's going to come out of California as the front runner still?
According to the current polls, Bernie is still the front runner in California. But I think as Super Tuesday is approaching, more and more people are taking seriously this choice they have to make and looking into the candidates. Hey, who's this Bloomberg guy who was on TV all the time? And what about these other candidates? Should I give Biden another look? Should I give Warren or Klobuchar or Buttigieg another look? I think those early polls, there's a lot of uncertainty in them. There's still a lot of folks saying, I don't know that person. I'm not familiar. And so Sanders is coming out ahead, but that's a lot of name recognition.
So Chris Matthews, the political pundit on MSNBC, likes to say that the shape of the primary field determines the race. Right now you have Bernie Sanders as a Democratic Socialist and a hardcore support anywhere from 24 to 32%. And the rest of the other candidates carving up the remaining percentage, more moderate candidates, more mainstream, actual Democratic Party candidates. So Bernie wins California. The question will be is which of the other candidates that are sort of cannibalizing each other right now, which hit the 15% viability threshold, who actually nets delegates out of California on a proportional basis, congressional district by congressional district. So it'll bear watching. We'll know Bernie will be the top vote getter. I'd be shocked if that weren't the case. But you really have to look beneath that, which candidates are viable in all the congressional districts across the state.
So let's ask that question. Of the higher profile remaining ones, Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Michael Bloomberg, which one of those are likely to be out of the race by the time we're done with Super Tuesday?
Oh, that is a tough question. Yeah. I don't see any signs that anybody is ready to step away. But if Klobuchar and Buttigieg and Bloomberg don't do well on Super Tuesday, they might decide, well, I don't have the money to continue. Just like Andrew Yang said, well, I've looked at the math. And it just isn't there. Bloomberg, of course, can continue.
Yeah, he'll have the money.
It's not that he'll run out of money. So, for Pete and Amy, it's more about running out of money. For Bloomberg, it's more about how much more do I want to pour into something do I want to be a loser, or do I want to step back now and just turn my attention to supporting the party and defeating Trump?
Are any of those likely to? Who's the most likely to be a surprise on Super Tuesday? We know about Biden, we know about Bernie.
If it's a surprise, how are we supposed to know who's the most likely?
You're prognosticating. What do you mean how you're supposed to know? You don't get off the hook that easy, ma'am.
What I see happening is a repeat of what happened to the Republicans in 2016, where it was Trump and then all these other moderate Republicans freaking out that somebody who was not representative of the party was winning by default because they were splitting the vote, and yet nobody wanted to drop out. And so, when you're talking about how there's all these moderate Democrats over here splitting the vote, that's exactly what happened to the Republicans. And that is what led to Trump, in part, led to what Trump getting the nomination. And so I'm sure there's a lot of talk going on inside the campaigns, but nobody wants to be the person who sacrifices themselves for the good of the party. Yeah. So none of those moderates want to back out. And so I don't see any changes.
So other than the 15% threshold, which is if you don't get 15% in, I guess it's statewide, you don't qualify for any of the delegates. Mm-hmm. Other than that, do you see this not winnowing out? I mean, you think you're just talking about solidifying the field, but it sounds like everybody has enough of a base to stay in.
Well, back to your original question around the surprise, I need to disclose that I am endorsing Joe Biden. I initially endorsed Kamala Harris. She dropped out. I'm now in the Biden camp. I think actually the former vice president has an opportunity. Everybody's sort of casting him aside in the national media context. But we've got Nevada coming up. He's got to either win place or show in Nevada. I think he could win South Carolina and actually have momentum going into Super Tuesday. And it will be a mix across all these states. I think the vice president will net delegates in California and stay in the game. Bloomberg will stay in the game just on the resources. I think Warren Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg are really sort of on that bubble. They have to perform well on Super Tuesday to survive.
We're going to take a quick break. Gosh, there's a lot to talk about. We'll be right back. Stick around.
Dodged it, though.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen, and here is Melissa Michelson. This is the group you're going to see on election night when you come by Peninsula TV, channel 26 on your local network, or pentv.tv, live streaming. We're going to be here all night, election night, dodging more questions, Melissa Michelson. If you read the polls, one of the maybe the overriding central theme among Democratic voters is, I got to get somebody who can beat President Trump. Who's made the best case for that? The last debate, one of the great frustrations was that they beat up on each other. Nobody beat up on Trump. It was a good night for President Trump. Do you see, which one of these people do you see going head to head with him and doing very well?
Well, there's a lot of questions within that question because, yes, everyone's making a case for electability, and a lot of them are being very deliberate about it and saying, you know, here's where I can win. I'm the only one who's done this. I'm the only one who's won in these kinds of states. I'm the only one who can win with these kinds of voters. They're all making the electability argument. I think that's very different than who can go head-to-head against Trump in a debate, because I think there's a lot of suspicion that there won't be any fall debates, that Trump will just back out. And so then we're not going to get to see them make those arguments against Trump on stage. It'll just be, you know, an ad war. It'll be it'll be independently. But they're all making this case because they know for most Democrats that is the thing that they are obsessed with. Like, we just got to win.
In fact, you can make a case if there are no debates. Biden has done better as time has gone on, but that may not be his forte. I mean, clearly his argument all along has been, the polls show he's the one guy who consistently is beating President Trump.
It's generally understood that the Democrats will win the popular vote like we did last time. It's all about the Electoral College and the 9 to 11 states that are in play, primarily Rust Belt, industrial Midwest states, as well as some in the South and the Southwest. But Biden, I think, can make an electability case. What's interesting, though, it feels like a little bit of a false choice. The Democrats, and I hear a lot of this, and I see it on social media, do we pick a candidate that energizes new voters, voters who've never participated in the process before? Do we energize those folks, or do we realize this is going to come down to the Obama-Trump voters, the true swing voters in, say, the Rust Belt, who will choose either Trump or somebody like a Biden or a Sanders? I think it feels like a little bit of a false choice. I think Democrats are going to be energized no matter what to get rid of Donald Trump. The question is, those voters on the bubble, who do they go for? But you need energized electorate on your side, and you need to attract swing voters. You have to do both to beat an incumbent president in a strong economy. So it's an uphill battle. People need to realize how difficult this is going to be with the economy continuing to grow, and how we do messaging around that to actually take out an incumbent president for all of his faults, and there are too many to mention on this broadcast.
You know, one of the things that California has been known for is the sleeping giant, the Latino vote. Is it still, or is it going to show up maybe this cycle? And if so, who among these candidates? I mean, we know Biden will do well in South Carolina because of his historic ties to the African American community. We don't really have a candidate in the Democratic primary who's known for his or her ties to the Latino community. What role do they play?
Well, they play a huge potential role, right? And so, as you mentioned, they've been given this maybe annoying moniker of the sleeping giant, but it is true that they're an increasingly powerful bloc in not just California, but Texas, Arizona, Florida, and they have the potential to decide the presidency. And so getting back to what Kevin was saying, it's about who excites them. So not just, so for example, there's a lot of Latino support for Bernie Sanders. And so the argument can be made that, well, if Sanders is the nominee, Latino turnout will come out, right? The giant will wake up because they'll want to come out and support Sanders. On the other hand, maybe any candidate, even if there's not that same raw enthusiasm, maybe the turnout will still be there in the Latino community because of the threat they see in a continued Donald Trump presidency. So any candidate can make an argument that they're the ones who can win the Latino vote and get all those folks participating. We don't know. They definitely sat out a bit more last time than one might have hoped, but like other communities, their turnout tripled in 2018. And so the enthusiasm is there in the Trump era for Latinos to come out and vote and stop him.
It's not an ethnically diverse field anymore, but in some ways it is diverse, and it's got a couple of women who are still running, first really openly gay candidate. Does that make any difference? Does a vote turn out?
Yes,
absolutely. Tell us how.
Absolutely makes a difference, because many people in the LGBTQ community are going to come out and vote because they just want to support Pete. Like that is an important symbolic event, that there's an openly gay man running for president. Many women, some of whom came out for Hillary and were disappointed that we didn't get the first woman president, but many women still feel like it's time, and so they're going to come out for Amy, they're going to come out for Elizabeth. So it's important for those folks that they have somebody they can vote for. Not everybody thinks that means that candidate can win, right? There's hope. There's hope that Pete can win. There's hope that Elizabeth can win. There's hope that Amy can win. But a lot of it is just the excitement of having the opportunity to cast a ballot, right? To go out on Super Tuesday and cast a ballot for a woman or for an openly gay man. That's really empowering.
I'm just struck by the remaining field. There seems to be this giant bubble of very few candidates in their 50s and 60s, which is sort of a political prime, if you will. You've got a 38-year-old mayor of a small town, smaller than San Mateo, the city of San Mateo. You've got three older white men in their late 70s. Elizabeth Warren's in her 70s. The only candidate that is in that sort of 50s and 60s sweet spot is Amy Klobuchar,
which she's reminding us.
Which she is reminding us. But it is interesting that the way the DNC set up the rules around debates and so forth, it favored candidates with national name identification like Biden and Sanders, and even Warren was something of a political celebrity. And then sort of niche candidates that were able to do things online and do branding, like Mayor Pete. He's got a whole branding going on online, and the Yang Gang, Andrew Yang.
On that question, I'm going to interrupt you.
Okay.
We got to take a break. We'll be back for our last segment. Stick with us.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen, and she is Melissa Michelson. This is our team on election night. Be with us starting at 8 o'clock on election night. We're going to have all the local results. We're going to talk a lot about Super Tuesday. We'll have guests, special features. This is where you're going to want to be on election night. Parties, meh. You want to be here. Let's talk a little bit about this, the hot race in this area, which is the race to replace Jerry Hill, who's termed out. 13th Senate race. There are 5 Democrats running. Everybody says it's a race that's tough to call because there are 5 candidates, and it seems sort of like mirroring the presidential race. No one has seized control of the race. What's your take on that race, if any? If you don't have one, I'll let you off the hook this time.
No, I actually have an opinion about this race. I feel like there's a couple of really strong candidates, and I feel like the endorsements from Jerry Hill and Gavin Newsom are really giving Josh Becker a boost. But you've got several other candidates who are strong contenders to make that top 2 cutoff. So I don't think it's completely wide open. I think there's several candidates, including the Republican and the Libertarian, who probably aren't going to make the cut. And some of the Democratic candidates just aren't as strong as the others.
Huge amount of independent expenditure in this race.
Well, you knew the independent expenditures would find their way into a Silicon Valley Senate seat, a high-profile seat. I was surprised, frankly, at sort of the late development nature of this race. I kept waiting for the mail to hit as a high-frequent voter, and it's really hitting right now. But people have been voting now for a couple of weeks, but we're awash in mail and TV and online advertisements, which you knew was going to happen at some point. I think there's a lot of confusion. These candidates are trying to get attention during a presidential contest. There's only so much political news and information that can be absorbed by the average voter. Yeah. So they're really trying to cut through. I think it's totally unpredictable at this point. Josh Becker, just on the strength of the endorsements, is certainly in play. I'm curious, it's a test of the top 2 system. I'm curious to see if 2 Democrats can be the top 2 vote getters and head to the fall, and whether that second Democrat is going to be Michael Brownrigg or if it's going to be Shelley Mazer. There will be a strong San Mateo County-based candidate, I hope, in that top 2 if in fact it's 2 Democrats going to the fall, because this Senate district is very much based in San Mateo County. Josh Becker, while he lives in Menlo Park, ran for office previously to the South County and Santa Clara County. So it'll be very interesting to see if a second Democrat can make it into that top 2 and who those 2 Democrats are going to be.
What impact, if any, does it have that it's all mail? This is the second general election where we've had all mail, but it's the first presidential. We know from 2018 that it drove a huge increase in turnout from election to election. What, if any, impact does it have that we're voting all mail?
Well, it means that you get a lot more completions. So folks are excited about the presidential race. The primary is certainly drowning out everything else. But if you're voting at home with your vote by mail ballot, after you voted for your preferred presidential candidate, then you're like, oh, there's other stuff, and you can go Google it. You can go, look through your recycling bin and look at some of those mailers that have been piling up. So I think it means that people will be more thoughtful about those down ballot races, and you'll see less drop off, that more people will complete their ballots because they have that chance to sit at their computer and look everything up.
I think it adds an element of unpredictability because you're paired with the presidential contest and we actually matter this time, that you may actually have some voters who are somewhat infrequent voters suddenly have a ballot on their kitchen table and they want to vote for that person Bloomberg or against that person Bloomberg whose ads they keep seeing. And that may actually drive more participation in the Senate count as well, which really makes it unpredictable, I think.
Yeah, getting things in the mail, even if it's a ballot, is a reminder that there's an election going on. And we know from political science research that if you remind people there's an election, they're more likely to vote.
Yeah, so. And as you were talking about earlier, it's halfway through February or more, and a huge number of ballots have not yet been turned in. So there's still a large, so that leads to sort of our final question. What is your sense of what is on, what's the mood of voters? Are they unhappy? Are they, you see a political situation where you've got 2 sort of extreme positions that are really hammered, nailed down, and is there a vast middle of people who don't know where to go? I've used the phrase before, we've had a lot of growth without prosperity. Is there uncertainty among people? Is that uneasiness, or just they're not sure who to vote for yet?
I think a lot of folks aren't sure who to vote for because they're all trying to game the system and vote for the person who can win in November. And so they are not sure if they should follow their gut or if they should be looking at the polls and so I think that creates a lot of uncertainty in people, and there's so much on the line, right? All the media and all these commentators are warning everyone, well, 4 years of Trump was one thing, but if he's reelected, you know, all the norms, all this stuff that you've been used to goes out the window in terms of democratic norms, and so there's a lot of pressure.
You mean you don't agree with Susan Collins that he learned his lesson? I think he learned a lesson. I think he learned the wrong one.
Evidence suggests he has learned the wrong lesson.
Yeah, I would say apprehension and anxiety. Folks that don't really normally talk about politics know I'm involved in politics, so they will share their anxiety with me about this president being reelected, what it means for the country, the level of division and anger that finds its way online through social media. We feel very divided. I think we need a candidate on our side who can unify not only the party, but unify the country and heal the country. So there's a lot of anxiety about the outcome of this election, where democracy is actually on the ballot, and the American experiment in many ways, what we've come to think of as the American political system in many ways, is on the ballot as well. So this feels heavy.
Yeah. You're not just voting for your preferred candidate, you're voting to save democracy. That's a lot of responsibility. You know?
Are we up to it? That's the question.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah. So how do you think, the other point I guess I wanted to make is, we're used to elections being over on election night.
Yeah.
And because we're voting by mail, it could be a week or more before we really know what's happened.
Well, Nevada is going to kind of ignore us. Like they've already said, we do not promise to have the results the next day.
Yeah.
And we need to stop thinking that that's how this works and get more used to these delays. If you want to be able to vote on election day and postmarked on election day, then you have to be willing to wait.
Well, here's a promise we can keep. We're going to be here on election night, give you whatever results there are to be had, give you whatever analysis we can. We're going to round up Super Tuesday, California, all the local races. So be with us then. And join us next time on The Game. I'm Mark Simon.
And I'm Kevin Mullen.
We'll see you soon. Thanks.